To kick us off this morning, our first presenter is coming to us from Wiley College over in East Texas, the Rev Dr. Dominique Robinson, Dean of Chapel and many things at Wiley College. Reverend Robinson, take it over.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Kelly, for that kind introduction. It is a pleasure and honor to see you all on every time zone you find yourself in. And to all of the mothers and mother figures, happy Mother's Day weekend. We celebrate you every day, actually. I want to share with you all a bit of research that I started actually in 2000 and let's say 11, 13, that continued to work, and it came out a little bit more moving into higher education along with my sister chaplains, Reverend Brown over at Howard University as the director of the Wesley Foundation, Reverend Rogers over at the Wesley Foundation at Tuskegee University, and Reverend Kenya Lavelle, the university chaplain and director of religious life at Bethune-Cookman University. And so what I want to share with you, I call it the I homiletic. It does belong to me, trademarked by me is my research. And so the I homiletic, I'm talking about how preaching and teaching that clicks. And so the I homiletic is, I'm trying to get on my PowerPoint. Okay, it's moving. There we go. I homiletic, a contemporary communication method using technology and social media linguistics. Why is that important for us right now? So I started a research project. This is part of my doctorate of ministry work that I said continue to move towards. And you know what? I forgot it was on a timer, so it moved without me clicking it. I'm going to stop sharing so I can talk to you about it a little bit more. So in essence, what you find is a research with about 3,500 informal surveys, ethnographic research dealing with Black millennials at the time. And it really ranged from individuals who were between the ages of 13 to 30. Why does that matter now? Because those 13, 14, 15-year-olds, 18-year-olds became college students. And so the research then, it was about how do I preach to this group, connecting them to the Black church. Then in working with my sister chaplains, I discovered those same tenets that work for making preaching effective also works for religious life programming and teaching at an HBCU. And so when I pose the question that we're presenting today in my little time and what in the 2020 has happened around our HBCU students and religious life programming, preaching and teaching, I find that these same tenets are effective and parallel. And so I want to share that with you all. I want you also to know that I speak this quickly normally. It's not because I'm nervous. I'm really a New Jersey native and this is my cadence. And if I was preaching, I would tell a mother to wave her hand and tell me to slow down. If you need me to slow down, just go back to the recording and slow it down a little bit because I don't have much time. And so I will share with you a few things. First, let's talk a little bit about what's going on with this generation. It's several generations, actually, not just the millennials, but the Gen Zs, Gen Y, Alpha generation, all those are coming up. So what we discovered with my survey is that there are these elements that they identify with. You got confusion, which is really rooted in pluralistic society. Because there's pluralism and so many options, there's a confusion off of what should I select, what should I choose, what should I do, what school should I go to, what should I study, and all these different elements. Drugs as recreation, sex as recreation, pop culture, music, the role of the church, particularly I'm speaking about traditional Black churches. What is the role of faith and church and religion in life? There has been a loss of connectivity with this God that we speak about, a process God, particularly in light of, I'm jumping one of the boxes when we start talking about poverty and police brutality. Where is the God that's supposed to save me in the middle of racial injustices? Where is this God that you're preaching about that was with you during slavery and Jim Crowism and Jane Crowism? Is this God still existing? Like, we can't run and be Black. We can't do anything and be Black. So help me understand. So the role of church, the role of God and spirituality. We also have found that our students are having children younger, and so they're becoming adults, a little faster, a little bit more responsibility. Police brutality, I shared that with you. Poverty, the line has shifted, and image. This matters more as we move into the pandemic, because again, what's going on? Our students were sent home. All homes were not safe. Domestic violence increased. Mental health became a major concern. Many of our students returned back to their homes, and if they didn't have to become the primary caregiver or the primary provider, they certainly had to contribute towards the household. And how they balanced then education and household responsibilities, being in a household that didn't always have internet access and resources. And so these were things we had to keep in mind as we were developing programming for our students to have entry points and connectivity. And so what's going on? Plenty of things, a myriad of things, radically contextual, just as I believe our preaching, our teaching, and our religious life programming should be if we need it to be effective. So let's be really clear about the breakdown of the generations we are attempting to serve. I get really annoyed when people use the word millennials as if that these are the students that are at the school. No, millennials are grown. They're trying to play Sally Mae back. They got bills, they're married, they are adults, right? So millennials, this umbrella term is 1980s to early 1990s. Then Gen Z, you see mid to late 1990s to 2010s. And then there's the alpha generation, 2010 to 2024. Why does this matter for us? I put the word imagination there because that's important. I argue that those who were born in the 80s are the last normal generation. They are the generation that was still able to knock on their neighbor's door, play outside. They played video games. They shot a duck. They had no idea where the duck went. They read books like Boxcar Children and Goosebumps, and they had to create and imagine these monsters. But then you get to the next generation, and that imagination isn't necessary because Disney, Pixar, and technology gives you everything before you even finish the book. So they didn't have to imagine the characters in Harry Potter because the movie came out. The video games start to become more real. You got Grand Theft Auto. You can literally take somebody out their car, beat them up, and see blood on the ground. And so this role of imagination, why is it important? For those of us who are teaching in traditional Protestant Christian practices, we're talking about a God they cannot see. So imagination has been stunted, and this role of imagination and resiliency go together. How are you resilient in a circumstance that you have to imagine overcoming? So the role of imagination shifts and change. While many would argue technology certainly helps us become extremely creative, that is true, but we have students who can't do long division or tell time because of technology or even spell. I don't even think they use spell check sometimes. I read these papers and I'm wondering, but I wanted to give a really clear breakdown of that. Why does that matter? Many of our students are on social media. That is where they are. We have to meet them where they are, and not just social media. They are a virtual generation. Babies are being born now, know how to swipe an iPad before turning a page in a book. And so you find that there are several social media platforms, and what makes them so distinct and different is actually the language. And so if all of us are using Facebook right now, but we're using a different language, I'm using English, someone else is using Spanish, someone else is using Korean, that becomes 3 social media platforms in the social medium of Facebook. And so when we start talking about the diverse ability of all of the social media platforms, these become various access and entry points to connect with our students and to find them. It's also important to know that the pillars in which many of the social media platforms are designed helps us understand how students comprehend things. For example, TikTok is the #1 leading social media platform right now in 2021. When we think about TikTok, you realize that it's required to have a short, consistent song, routine, and relevancy. When you take those pillars away and realize these are things I need to incorporate in my religious life programming, my teaching and or my preaching, it helps you to be able to connect with individuals, because if they can connect with that platform, take the pillars away to see what tenets you can use for your articulation, your preaching, your teaching, and your religious life programming. We know that social media has always been around, but the tension has always been real. I'm going to skip over that really quickly because when you go to my small group, we'll discuss a little bit more. In light of that, I birthed iHomiletic. At the time, I focused a lot on preaching. And so this is what I argued. If we design our sermons, but really now our programming and our teaching, the same way that Apple markets its products, we will connect with a whole lot more people than we intended to. We have to watch what we engage, both the text, that whatever sacred text we're using, and the context. We have to exegete, be really clear about who we are attempting to connect to, knowing what's going on in their lives, and being really clear about the sources you use. We have to, I use this about teaching and preaching, so I'm going to say this even here. We have to start looking at scholars who don't always have the same opinion as us, because we are dealing with individuals who have a really wide spectrum of spirituality and respect. This is a generation that will research what you're saying. And if you're wrong, they have now lost trust in anything you are saying. The authority is now gone. So it's best to say, I don't know, let's Google it together, versus trying to just pull something from out of wherever. Since we're being recorded, I won't use any, radical language in this moment. I would like to keep my job. And so after we engage and exegete, you also execute. You want to execute it your authentic self. Young people can smell a phony a mile away. So being your authentic self, not attempting to be too hip, embodiment and experience. For experience, what I mean by that is when we talk about social media presence and technology, there's a way to go back and follow up any people who tuned in, liking their comments, engaging their comments, asking questions, doing surveys. Don't just put something out there and leave it out there, but going back to engage the people who are, so to speak, in your virtual pews and in your virtual program, and engaging people in the chat. So as we do our programming, while you might be the main speaker, assigning a student or work study to be in the chat, whether it's on Facebook and on YouTube, so that people feel like they are connecting to the experience in live, a very live experience. And it gives people to feel like they're talking in church, because when we get back, we were not going to be able to whisper as loud in church, but it gives you the opportunity to feel like you're just talking in church. And so I also argue in our design of things, the same way Apple does its products, it needs to be sleek, compact, concise, user-friendly, and always ready for an upgrade. Now, if you are not an Apple individual, I'm praying for you. Come on over to the Apple side. But Apple has a way of making sure there are so many upgrades to your device that at a certain point, you can no longer use the device. You are forced into purchasing the new device. And I think it's an amazing economic strategy. But that says something to those of us who get stuck in our ways. This has always worked. We will always do this. This is the way this school has done this. No, we have to be ready for an upgrade, and at times get rid of the old device, old practice, old tradition, so that we can remain culturally relevant and effective and impactful. The last thing I'm going to share with you is a few pillars that I found that work particularly for higher education. It's the idea of visibility. Students need to know who you are, where you are, and how they can get to you. So on every platform, whether it's the school's website, it is Canvas or the learning management system, on the social media platforms. And I know many of us like don't use my personal one, then create one for the student organization or some sort of thing. Of course, checking all the policies and procedures at your school, because maybe they don't want you to have individuals. So that's like the footnote that I didn't say out loud. All right. Accessibility. Students need accessible points to be able to connect, meaning they don't want to click 4 or 5 times to get to your event. If it is a Zoom link, put the link in the message. If it is a Google Doc that they have to review, put the link available, like just one click. That's what we want, one click. And in order to practice that, I want everybody to do me a favor, wherever you are, draw a lowercase letter I with your dominant hand. Just draw it. I'm watching. Okay. You guys are being like students. You're not listening to me. Draw a lowercase letter I. Thank you. Oh, okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. Many of you drew the stem and then the dot. My argument is, give the dot first, make it so impactful that we choose to follow you with the stem and make various I homiletic moments in your programming, your teaching, and your preaching. That dot is called the tittle. It's all about the tittle, guys. And so accessibility, predictability. In light of the pandemic, life became super inconsistent. So have some predictability, some consistency. Vulnerability creates space for people to share their real feelings, including a mental health provider, so that they can be shared. Accountability, community, which I then believe leads us to radical hospitality. I am going to stop sharing and conclude my time because there are various other workshop presenters that need to come. And so if you want to learn a little bit more about this, join me in the breakout session. We're here for not all day, 2 more hours. So come on and join. Thank you so much for listening.